beautiful day, it's a beautiful time. Another opportunity has presented itself for us to talk about business, for us to talk about finance, for us to talk about economic issues and all the issues trending across the whole world. This is Early Exchange on Souk TV, and I am Femi Ayodele. I'm not alone, as usual. I have a company. Blessing.
Good morning, Femi.
Good morning.
I am Blessing AJ, and it's great to know that you are watching the Early Exchange this morning. The show is always promised to be a very interesting one. We'll take a look at several issues that will benefit you, and as we always say, make you be in a position to make informed decisions so you can profit from whatever exchange that you do in your business and even in your personal life. Straight away, let's get it over now to Ola Oluwa Awe, who will bring us updates on current happenings across the globe.
Good morning and welcome to the morning news update on Souk News. I am Olaoluwa Awe. The morning is looking promising all around the world. Let me get you started with the update. I start with Nigeria, where the new Minister of Works, David Umahi, has directed all contractors handling federal government highways in Nigeria to abandon the use of asphalt in favor of concrete technology. This directive has led to protests from contractors who argue that it breaches existing contracts and could result in substantial financial losses, as they have already invested in asphalt technology equipment and materials. They have warned that a shift to concrete technology could lead to the suspension of ongoing projects, redesigning of roads, increased importation of cement, and potentially higher costs for road construction in Nigeria. And moving on, President Bola Tinubu has praised Indian investors for pledging nearly $14 billion during the Nigeria-India Presidential Roundtable, encouraging them to invest in Nigeria, citing it as offering the best returns. Notable investments include $8 billion from Indorama Petrochemical for fertilizer production expansion, $3 billion from Jindal Steel and Power, and $1.6 billion from Skipper Sail Limited for 2,000 megawatts of new power plant in the northern part of Nigeria. The president emphasized Nigeria's commitment to fostering a conducive investment climate and expressed pride in the record-breaking performance of the Nigerian stock market during his tenure. And moving on, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, has approved an increase in the price of prepaid electricity meters, with single-phase meters now priced at 81,975 naira and 16 kobo, up from the over 58,600 naira price, and the three-phase meter now at 143,836 naira and 10 kobo, up from over 109,000 naira as per a circular dated September 5, 2023. The adjustment aims to strike a balance between meter asset providers, MAPs, and end users as the customers, allowing MAPs to recover reasonable cost while preventing excessive pricing for consumers. And the Department of State Services, DSS, has arrested some officials of the Nasarawa State Emergency Management Agency and their associates for allegedly diverting palliatives intended for vulnerable citizens. The suspects are accused of selling these palliatives in Lafia's Modern Market and other locations. The DSS spokesperson, Peter Afunaya, confirmed that the agency has recovered some of the diverted items and is conducting similar operations in other states across the country. Also, the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo, has stated that he will not ignore the concerns and red flags raised by citizens and aviation agencies regarding the concession of Nigeria's 4 major airports and the Nigeria Air project. He emphasized that both projects remain suspended until final decisions are made by the federal government. Additionally, Keyamo mentioned that construction on the second runway project, which involved compensating affected residents, is set to begin next week, indicating progress in airport infrastructure development. And moving on, away from Nigeria, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has raised concerns about the country's rapidly growing population, emphasizing the need to slow down its birth rate to prevent a potential crisis. From the current rate of over 2 million, al-Sisi stated that Egypt should aim to reduce its annual birth to 400,000 in order to effectively provide employment opportunities and social services for its citizens. Speaking at the inaugural Global Congress on Population, Health and Development, he hinted at the possibility of adopting measures similar to China's one-child policy, which he viewed as a successful approach to population control, adding that other African countries should consider population control measures, given the continent's limited resources in the face of surging population growth. Sudan's government has encouraged airlines to resume flights to Sudan after Egypt Air became the first commercial flight to enter or leave Sudan since its descent into conflict in April. Egypt Air flights carried more than 100 passengers from Egypt's capital, Cairo, to the eastern Sudan city of Port Sudan on Tuesday morning and returned to Egypt in the afternoon. Red Sea State Governor Fathallah Haj Ahmed told media that the flight by Egypt Air signaled that Sudan is safe and stable for international flights. And moving on, African leaders have issued a declaration proposing new taxes across the world to fund action against climate change. The Nairobi Declaration was issued at the end of the three-day Africa Climate Summit in the Kenyan capital. The heads of state say the declaration will form the basis of their negotiating position at November's COP28 summit in Dubai. Researchers say that despite suffering from some of the worst impact of climate change, the continent only receives about 12% of the financing it needs. And away from that now, East African leaders, EAC, have agreed to extend the mandate of a regional military force deployed in the conflict-ridden eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, following a summit held in Nairobi. The East African community, consisting of 7 nations, had initially sent troops into the volatile area in response to the resurgence of the M23 rebel group in November. Following a summit held in Nairobi, a statement from the EAC revealed that the heads of state have decided to prolong the mandate of the regional force until December 8, pending an evaluation report. It is now time to give you reports from the Middle East and other parts of the world. So coming your way in a jiffy are the most important developments in those parts of the world. So stay tuned. And welcome back to the morning news update. In case you're just joining in, I am Olaoluwa Awe. And the United Arab Emirates UAE has launched its sustainable finance framework as part of its long commitment to sustainability. The new framework allows for the issuance of green and sustainable debt instruments to finance projects which enable the transition to a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy. The framework also provides the distribution of social debt instruments, leading to a positive societal impact. The framework will also cover Emirates NBD group entities such as the Emirates NBD, Emirates Islamic, Deniz Bank, and Emirates NBD Asset Management, and will accelerate the group's efforts regarding innovative sustainable finance offerings. Moving on now, still in the Middle East, let's touch on this. Emirates Airline experienced a busy summer, carrying over 14 million passengers with an average seat load factor of over 80% across its global network between June and August. Dubai remained a popular destination, attracting 2 million travelers during the summer months, with top inbound markets including the United Kingdom, India, Germany, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, China, Egypt, and Kuwait. Emirates anticipates increased demand for travel to Dubai during the winter season due to global conferences and events, and it has continued to invest in its services and products to meet customer preferences. Moving on now, Southeast Asian leaders have condemned the ongoing violence in Myanmar, directly attributing the bloodshed to the military generals who seized power in a coup in February 2021. The 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, convened in Jakarta after the generals failed to implement the previously agreed upon 5-point consensus aimed at resolving the crisis. Myanmar, also an Asian member, has been excluded from high-profile events due to its failure to adhere to the 5-point consensus. In response to the Asian statement, Myanmar's foreign ministry rejected it, asserting that the views expressed were not objective and the decisions were biased and one-sided. Moving on now, heavy rain caused by the remains of Typhoon Haikyuu has led to flooding in southeastern China, especially in Fujian province. This has forced schools to close, stopped public transportation, and made thousands of people leave their homes. More than 36,000 people have been evacuated from their homes, and the floods damaged power and communication systems. Also, a large area of farmland got flooded, causing losses estimated at $75 million. And away from that, billionaire Elon Musk reportedly withdrew a $1 billion loan from his rocket company SpaceX around the same time he was in the process of acquiring Twitter, now rebranded as X, for $44 billion. This loan was backed by a portion of Musk's SpaceX stock and received approval from SpaceX board in October. Musk's ability to leverage his ownership stakes in various companies, including Tesla, has been a long-standing practice, and SpaceX has often served as the lender. And that's our package today on the Morning News Update. Thank you very much for watching. I am Olaoluwa Awe. Stay tuned for analysis.
Thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange on SIG News. This is the time when we analyze some stories in the news, and the gentleman in the studio will help me do justice to that. I have Idausa Osamanze, Director, Research and Policy, Africa Development Studies Center, and Femi, of course, you've already seen. Now, it seemed like there was one story, actually, that was not in the news, or I did not read that to us, because from the way Idausa Osamanze looks, it seems his status has changed from from Mr. to Honorable, because at the end of yesterday's show, we talked about legislative processes yesterday, and then we agreed on the table that he should become an honorable member. He should get into the House. So it seems that happened yesterday. Ola did not tell us. So let us ask Idausa Osama and say, what has changed from yesterday to now? Because he looks so honorable this morning.
Well, I'm hopeful now because with the verdict yesterday from the tribunal, there's hope that I can get my own ticket.
You look wonderful.
Thank you.
Whenever you dress like this, it makes me feel like it's Friday, so it's 01 bedtime.
Yeah, today is a special one bet.
We can't wait
This
to.
this is special one bet. So we are in the heart of Lagos. So anywhere you see food, just start to eat.
Good. That's some development. At least it's developing stomach infrastructure.
Oh, yes.
All right, now moving into the news analysis, we have the story about the new Minister of Works, David Umahi, who's directed all contractors handling federal government highways in Nigeria to abandon the use of asphalt in favor of concrete technology. Yes, the directive has led to protests from contractors who argue that it breaches existing contracts and could result in substantial financial losses, as they've already invested in asphalt, technology equipment and materials. Idosa, the use of concrete technology for road construction instead of asphalt. Ordinarily, that may seem like, okay, it's going to be to make the work more durable. But the contractors are arguing that it's a breach of the contract and it will impact greatly on them financially, as they've already ordered asphalt. So they are also threatening to abandon work. What is the way to go here?
Well, I think for me, Umahi was very clear in his assertion on these issues, that he has used concrete in Ebonyi State as governor. And from all the analysis, and also being an engineer, that it's even cheaper to do road with concrete than with asphalt. So it's not the cost supposed to be rising, the cost is supposed actually to be going down. But I think what has people have gotten to, and I think we must also get to that point in Nigeria, that where people are not held accountable when contracts are signed. Take, for example, if there are service level agreement with this contractor, that if you use this asphalt on this road, it has to be durable and spend up to 10 years before there's a crack on it. And if there's a crack, they have the responsibility to come and maintain that road for a period of 10 years. They will not be arguing that they want to leave what they are doing. You see, a lot of people have been taking advantage, you see, of the way the system has been designed to run, to favor particular individuals. I think that even the contractors themselves also need to be even sensitive to the plight of the nation. It's not just about ripping up money, because we see, for example, this Ibadan, Lagos Express Road, stress. We have been on it since 1999 date, over 23 years. You do it, there's rain come after the following month, then of course the repair is starting somewhere else. Who is bearing the brunt? It is the government and the people of Nigeria. And I think it's time that government really need to take contracting very serious, where people are being sanctioned for not doing their job well. Elsewhere, when contracts are signed to contractors, road contractors, their service level agreement are signed to say this is the duration or the durability of this road for a number of years. And if this does not happen, such people are blacklisted. They have not been able to prove the durability of the road. Now, if you go to some of these roads that have been done in the last 2 years, they're already fading out. So I think people should have the nation in their heart while they are thinking about profitability. This is where we as a nation really need to work. And thank God today we are still looking and speaking to issues about value and public policy.
You see, what I see playing out here is, a clash of interest. You have the minister, on the other hand, he just assumed office, and when coming into office, you come with this vision, new vision, with new strength, and being an engineer and someone who has done something similar to this, is coming up with a new idea. On the other hand, you have the, the contractors who are business owners who are looking at their business interests. The minister is looking at the interest of the nation, a situation where you have the duration of this project. So it's just a clash of interest. And naturally, when you're bringing new things on board, people tend to resist change, because it is necessary. The minister feels it's necessary for him to be able to deliver. He has a mandate to deliver. He's looking at delivery. While the other and the contractors are looking at the papers they've signed, the expenses they're going to incur when they change the method. And so for me, like Idahosa said, what's more important is to do what's in the interest of the nation. I want to see a situation where you have roads in Nigeria that will last for 20 years, that will last for 30 years, that won't have to keep spending money. Imagine, since 1999, we've been spending money on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway for almost 23 years. I think with this, we're looking forward to a station, we'll find an end to the issue of just wasting money.
But to maintain some level of consistency, so it doesn't seem like there's actually a breach of contract, because when contracts are bidded for, the bidder submits quotation. So what did the quotation state? Did they state that they were going to use concrete or asphalt? What was approved? So I think that to maintain that, yes, it's good that the minister is actually asking that concrete technology be used for road construction instead of asphalt. But I think it should have been with new contracts, not with already signed or approved contracts. So it doesn't seem like, oh, this was not the agreement, this was not what we agreed. It seems to be like a kind of interruption in an already agreed process. So I think maybe it could have just allowed the already approved contract go the way, but ensure that standard is maintained. But going forward, new contracts should take this.
Yeah, but you see, everywhere in the world, and I think these things are done, people have to renegotiate. This is a new regime, and this contract, have they been fully executed? No. What's the level of investment in the asphalt, so-called asphalt? This thing has to be examined, and I'm not thinking that the minister is insensitive. But I think what he's speaking to is the issue of quality. That if we have to deliver something, we have to deliver it qualitatively. And I think the onus is also on the contractor to say, okay, well, they can, of course, say, because the provisions are also there on the Procurement Act, that if the ministers so feel that the state of the road as it were now, and they can show proof that they have done some substantial investment in asphalt, and then they are asking that they should use concrete to do the road, what they should do is to go to the minister on negotiation table to say, okay, we've done SY investment on asphalt. How do we balance this? Are we going to share the risk and the loss? And if there's a new BOQ on the use of concrete, which is far higher than asphalt, how do we do with the excess? So, of course, the contract can be renegotiated. But I think what is important is that we have quality in our roads, that when we finish one road, because government is supposed to be a continuum. This is what we were saying yesterday, where you find a situation, the same road will be on the same budget for
year
10 years, 20 years, because you are doing shoddy job, and we will need to repair it by another regime. But I think we should just get to that point where we get to say, okay, well, let's start to do things right. That for me is what it is. So that if you have not invested so much in asphalt, if there is a need for variation in costs because of the new command, I think they should go to the negotiation table with the minister, not threatening the state.
Yeah, that's a concern for me. The quick resolve to suspending ongoing projects, that's too erratic, and I think they should have used better words. Like you said, renegotiation. So if there's a window for renegotiation, they should have suggested that, not outrightly saying that it could lead to suspension of ongoing projects. So that seemed more like a protest taken too far, and it's not a good thing that we should be looking to. I've seen roads constructed using concrete technology, and I've seen the ones constructed using asphalt, and the ones
just look at
using concrete.
The road.
Yes, because maybe it has a higher layer, sort of, so it's not really, it's not easily eroded by flood.
Yeah.
But what we even have, the problem we even have with those roads constructed with asphalt is that it's just a single layer. It's more like you sprinkling asphalt over earthen road, and so it doesn't last long.
Yeah.
That has been the primary problem with the use of asphalt, because they just want to minimize the quantity that they use. So I think sometimes room should be made for renegotiation, for dialogue, rather than an outright resort to some form of protest by saying it may lead to suspension of ongoing projects. Who's going to suffer for that? The citizens, and it's not a good thing at all. All right, moving straight now on to power issues. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NEC, has approved an increase in the prices of prepaid electricity meters. Single-phase meters will now cost 81,975 naira. They used to cost 58,600 naira. And then three-phase meters will now cost 140,000 naira. Rather, 140,836 naira. They used to cost 109,000 naira. Now, increasing the cost of prepaid meters, there are two major concerns. First of all, a lot of consumers have complained about not even having meters that are being paid for. So, increasing the cost of meters, does that now automatically guarantee availability, that when you pay for one, you are getting it? Femi?
Well, it's a cause for concern. You have a situation here that as a customer, you want value for your money. And here you have a situation that the meter is not even available. Maybe for cities like Lagos, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, yeah, provisions are being made for these things to be available. And average Nigeria now understand the impact of having a prepaid meter, because as a consumer, you want to save money, because you understand with the economic realities, you have priorities, you have expenses. So they're looking at how to save money. So for me, this kind of development for a consumer will be uncomfortable with it, because you've prepared that something you used to buy at the rate of 50,000 naira, now it's 90-something thousand naira. But the issue here is the fact that even the availability of the meter, it's questionable. In some remote areas, in villages, you see situation that these things are not available. There are people who can afford to pay for it because they know the efficiency of this material, this equipment. But if they are not available, it makes it look as if they are not going to get justification for the expenses they are going to make. So it's part of the economic realities that we are facing at this time: cost of inflation, increase in prices of goods and services, even the cost of production, because, fuel has increased, removal of fuel subsidy, and for producers, for the manufacturers of this prepaid meter is another factor. The cost of operations will have increased, and that's what is leading to all this. And then, but interestingly, all this is being pushed to the consumer, the end user at the end of the day, and that's just the way it is. But for me, I think since we all understand the necessity of having prepaid meter, let's just see what we can do to ensure that we strike a balance.
Okay, two things I'm going to take out of a lot of things that you said. One, justification. What is the justification for the increase in the price of meters? Now, if you ask discos, they will tell you that most of these meters are imported. Now, my question is, do we lack the technology? Do we lack the capacity to actually have these things produced locally, Idelsa?
You see, this is the real fundamental challenge for me, that the level of rent seeking in Nigeria is terrible. Who is the owner of the meter? Is it the consumer or
No,
the disco?
The discos.
Now, if you want me, why do you want me to come and patronize you to buy meter? Then allow the boys in Alaba to bring meter into the place. If I need a meter, I go and buy my own. So when I'm living where I am, I can carry it along. How will I invest my money to buy a property for you to make profit? You see, this is where, of course, those who are in position of authority must begin to interrogate this over-profiting nature of business people in Nigeria. It doesn't happen anywhere. It's only in this place that I have to buy a transformer to service a disco to give me light that I will pay for. This is absolutely unacceptable. If these people don't have power to provide infrastructure, they should do the one they are capable of doing. So I can buy my own meter anywhere I want it. and use it to monitor. So if it's my property. So even if I buy it 1 million in the market, that's not their business. But now you are going to give me a meter and say you are increasing the price. So that, of course, you will use it to bill me. For me, it's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. There is no justification for it. They are in business. And whatever that, it's just imagining that you are asking, you want to do service, and somebody is telling you the thing that you are going to use to deliver service to a person, the person is paying for it, the man is paying for the light, is paying for everything, and then he's still the one. You are saying, oh, you have to buy the meter. Now, what is the real problem? Is the problem of agency. We have people who are in Nigeria who say they are meter distributors in the value chain of electricity. And those people are holding a whole lot of people to ransom. And this is why you see the cost of things in Nigeria is on the roof. Because the agency practice in Nigeria is absolutely not necessary.
I wish we had more time to look at this because there are several angles to this issue. Now the meters are going to cost more. It makes it quite out of the reach of a lot of people, and that gives room for estimated billing, which is an issue that consumers have been fighting with the discourse. We'll talk about this another time, but now we need to go on a break so we can look at strategic planning in national development. Stay tuned.
Glad to have you join us. It's Deep Early Exchange, and we are set to bring you the main discussion for the day. Today we'll be looking at strategic planning and economic goals. What does that suggest to you as an individual, as a business owner? What do you need to do to understand the concept of strategic planning and setting economic goals, even for us as a nation, as a continent, how important it is? To help us shed more light on this, we're joined by Dr. Francis Musa Damboyi. He's a chartered psychologist. For 29 years. He has been engaging in competence enhancement skill, and is here to do justice to the topic. Dr. Damboyi, glad to have you join us on Early Exchange. Doctor, you might need to unmute yourself so that we can have a smooth conversation here. Can you hear me, Dr. Damboyi? Glad to have you join us. Good morning, Doctor. Okay, Blessing. Let's talk about how significant it is when it comes to strategic planning, you know, as an individual, starting as an individual, as a nation, as a continent. You know, most of the time as an individual, you set goals for yourself. You talk about financial goals, personal goals, family goals. In every aspect of you set goals. As a nation, why do you think it's important for us to set goals, you know?
Of course, it's important to set goals. If not, it would just be somebody working aimlessly without knowing where to go. Goals help you know when you've arrived at your destination. It's like you want to travel to somewhere. You just leave your house and somebody asks you, where are you going to? You say, I'm just going to where? You don't know. But when you set goals, it then determines the plans that should follow.
Hello, sir. Can you check
in order for you to get to your goal, which is your end point. So the goals will determine the plans, it will determine the sources that are needed, and it will determine the scale or the other actions that will follow up, and that is where strategy come in, because sometimes when you look at your plans, you may see that there are different obstacles, there are things that could impede those plans from coming to reality. So you need to plan on how you're going to beat those obstacles, how you're going to manage your resources, how you're going to make good use of time. This is where strategy comes in. Now, for a personal business, yes, that could mean that the location of your business has to change. It could also mean that the way your product would have to change to fit the exact need of your customers. It could also mean that the packaging of the product would need to also change to give it maybe a new look and maybe a new feel that makes it more appealing to consumers. Now, bringing it home down to national development, of course, every government, I'm talking about administrations now or regime, sets for itself different goals they want to achieve. But, like I said, in every goal, there may be impediments, there may be different things that will serve as an obstacle to achieving that. How do you creatively achieve your plan? That is where strategy comes in. For instance, government says that they want to reduce the rate of unemployment. How do you achieve that? Is government going to now bring more people into its employ? Or is government going to create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive so they can have more people come on board, so you can have more people become entrepreneurial, thereby reducing the rate of unemployment? So these are some of strategies that can be employed for the achievement of certain economic goals.
I like the word strategic or being strategic about, you know, plan. It's not just about planning. There are times you plan, but when you are not being strategic about it, it means that you are not putting into consideration the sensitive factors that are needed to be put into consideration for this plan to reach your goal. There is a lot of people plan, and because it's expected, maybe as a business owner, you make plans, you know, do paper plans. You know, there's this saying that when you fail to plan,
you plan to fail.
You plan to fail. So people make plans sometimes and say, oh, in fact, as individuals set goals for yourself that, okay, in the short run, I'm going to do this. In the long run, I'm going to do this. Within few months, I'm going to achieve this. You set monthly goals, quarterly, even yearly, you set goals for yourself. But you discover that in the end, or down the drain, you discover that even some of these goals are not being achieved because the word strategy is missing. That's the missing link between what you're planning and the result you're expecting, the word strategy. And if you look at, a nation like Nigeria and extension Africa, that's the missing link where you have strategy. People plan. There are instances where you do your budgeting, you include several projects, but if you look at the performance of the budget over the year, you discover that the word strategy is missing. When you discover maybe for over years now, budget performance has been performing below 30%. And that's why it's important to be more strategic. In fact, for nations, developing nations, it is more expected, to be more strategic in our national planning so that you have a situation that the goals that are being set as far as ministries, different ministries, different projects, different areas of life, the targets are being met. And so these are things that are very crucial for us to look at and to be able to have a better economic goals. For you to set economic goals also is very important. How do you want to spend your money? Where do you want to spend your money? And for you to also achieve your goal, the issue of timing is very important.
Very
Break it down
important.
to time. Is it going to be a short term? Is it going to be a long term? Is it going to be an annual investment? Is it going to be a daily investment? These things are very important. So it's good to be strategic. You do your paperwork, but more importantly, above doing paperwork, it is the implementation, the actions that follow, that brings the productivity and the result.
Yes, you made mention of some plans of government or even of people failing. One thing that a good strategy helps you with is to have a fail-proof plan. Because you could have a plan, but that plan is not fail-proof. It's for you to have like a plan B. If this doesn't work, what then do I do? And apart from having a plan B, for your plan, what are the enablers? What would enable your plan to work? Let's take, for instance, one of the plan of President Tinubu for Nigeria, which is to create a business-friendly environment, ease of doing business. Now, for that to happen, you recall that he signed 4 executive orders in keeping with his electoral promise to address unfriendly fiscal policies and multiple taxation that are stifling the business environment. That's a good strategy because he has a plan to make the business environment friendly. And then he looked at what are the issues that could stifle the business environment? What are the issues that could make business environments unfriendly? Multiple taxation is key because a lot of businesses complain, oh, we pay tax to federal, we pay tax to state, we pay tax to local, and even in the local government sometimes the tax collection is more like a repeat process. This one comes to you, the other one comes to you. So these are some of the issues that he had to plan. What would enable these plan of his, I'm talking about President Tinubu now, of making the business environment in Nigeria friendly? What will make it work? So he know that, okay, if part of the executive orders was the suspension of certain taxes, and then that was even pushed to, some of them were suspended, some of them were pushed over to September 1. So it gave the businesses a kind of relief at the time because the removal of subsidy, the effect of the removal of subsidy was just beginning to kick in and it was beginning to affect businesses. So these are some of the ways that a government can ensure that its plan becomes fail-proof. These are some of the ways that it can be strategic. Let's even look at the power sector, for instance. If government says we want to encourage entrepreneurs, then you know that what would entrepreneurs need? What you want to encourage manufacturers, for instance, what would they need? Manufacturers basically need power. So you've got to have a plan that would also ensure availability of power if you are to ensure that manufacturing goes on in the country. What about access to raw materials? What about access to roads? The manufacturers may want to be sited close to the market or have access roads that make it easy for them to move their goods to the market. These are some of the factors that should be considered for you to have a fail-proof plan, which can call a strategy.
That's impressive, Blessing. And now let's go on a short break for us to reconnect with our guests and have more discussion. It's still early exchange, and we'll return now to have more engagement and more robust discussion. Stay with us.
When an industry reaches where people are scrapping for the market, perhaps it's time to rethink what can be done by co-opetition, that is competition and cooperation, to increase the market size. I'd like to discuss a concept about market share and two options: scrapping for a diminishing market or trying to create a bigger cake by creating a bigger market. This stems from my discussion with a brewer who was complaining about the fact that the market was shrinking and also that the prices that they put up to mitigate against the higher tax on beer was resisted by customers. So not only was market shrinking, but also prices were being attacked. And to add insult to injury, a second big player has entered the market that wants to grab market share by all means. And the existing players are defending their turf. What is suffering is value because everybody is competing straight on price. And my feeling is, when an industry reaches where people are scrapping for the market, perhaps it's time to rethink what can be done by co-opetition, that is competition and cooperation, to increase the market size. This is my hypothesis. If you look at what drives beer sales, a lot of it is on the back of celebration in sports, especially football, in viewing centers. I can bet that if the national team, the Super Eagles, goes to the quarterfinal of the World Cup, the beer industry will sell more beer than they probably would have sold in the whole 2 years. And so I would say, instead of scrapping for that market that is dwindling, perhaps they should probably bring out a budget and come together and work with the Nigeria Football Association to develop grassroots football. It's long-term strategic investment, because by developing grassroots football and improving the league, which is also beneficial to the country, they're going to create the opportunity for the teams to advance to higher levels in global competitions. And that's a whole new market you're creating for your beer. But leaving this long-term strategy, which is a win-win for football, for Nigeria, and for your own industry, and scrapping for a diminishing market and destroying value, I have my doubts that that is a sustainable strategy. Rather, and this is not just for the beer market, for any market at all, when it gets to the point when we're scrapping for the dregs, maybe it's time to reimagine a new market.
Right, if you're just joining us, you have no cause to worry because the conversation is just starting. We're looking at strategic planning and economic goals, how that will affect you as a person and how that's going to affect our nation. We're being joined by Ida Hoser, who is also a strategic planner and an economic analyst. Ida Hoser, glad to have you join us.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here as always.
Always a pleasure having you around, to provide analysis and insight to. Let's look at, we're looking at strategic planning and economic goals. Let's look at the significance of having strategy when it comes to planning and setting economic goals. Let's set the ball rolling with that.
Well, the word strategy is a military term, and it speaks to what is being put in place or what choices are being made to either overrun or overpower an opponent or an enemy, as the case were. Now, when you bring this into economic perspective, what you're saying is that you are having that nations have to make choices what to do and what not to do that will give them a competitive edge over other nations. And so you have a goal. Take, for example, the current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, whose goal is to grow the economy of Nigeria by 6 straight for 4 years. Now, what choices are before us as a nation to be able to achieve this growth that is being projected? At the present, the GDP, which was projected to be 3, is already growing at about less than 2.5%. Now, what magic do we need to do, not just to double that GDP growth, but to triple it? This is a challenge. And therefore, government is to sit down and look at how to prioritize its operations such that we will be able to actually generate that value for us. And this is where you saw, for example, the Minister of Solid Mineral coming to tell you and said, well, to what we have, we will contribute 50% to the current GDP by the time we put plans in place to develop the solid mineral. So this is what the plans are. You are looking at, you have a clear goal, you have set objective, this is vision, this is where we are going to reach. This is what we are targeting, and this is the purpose. Now, we set the goal for ourselves, and we're also now planning around that goal to see how we will be able to get to where we should get to. And in this plan, you are not just going to be mere wishing. You're going to set in place key performance indicators and key result areas where you actually want to see result happen. And they will be very well marked out so that anybody who sees it will be able to say, oh, this is the progress we are making and we are getting closer to our goal.
Okay, taking it up from the plan of the government to triple Nigeria's GDP over a space of 4 years. Now, how's that going to happen? What are the factors that will lead to that? Let's even begin from production, which would increase the GDP too. So what plans should follow up to enable that it is not just a dream, but it actually comes to be?
Yeah, I think these are part of the things that the governments are speaking to already. If you were following the news yesterday, you will see that even when the president was in India trying to tidy up a business agreement with an Indian business mogul of an investment worth up to about $14 billion into the economy. Now, which sector that will go in is another thing to actually also determine. So what government is doing, or what government should do, is to see what critical sector we will need to invest in. This regime has said we want to prioritize agriculture so that we can be producing what we eat and eat what we produce. Nigeria has no business importing grains, for example. We can plant that locally. Now, there are also other areas where we can also invest that has some low-hanging fruits. Take, for example, we have shoe and leather in Nigeria here, because God has also blessed us with plenty of cows, although we have turned all of them to Momo. No, but you see, we can quickly leverage on that so that we don't import shoes, we don't import beds into this country, and invest in those areas where we can use leather, and the foreign exchange that is flying out here will be creating business here, and even to our neighboring African countries. We can leverage that. We can invest in not too complex industrial productions. These are all things that government is trying to do. Even, of course, the production of CNG car. You see, of course, some Nigerian governments also are taking delivery of some cars from Innocent Motors. All these are the things that government need to do to really steer up economic activities within the nation to grow the GDP. The real truth of the matter is that 6 is actually a moderate figure. We can actually grow the GDP beyond 6 or 12% if we do things the way they should.
In reference to a country like Nigeria and by extension to other African countries, how will you describe the approach to long-term planning? And you discover over time there are plans on table, but they don't materialize. A good example is Vision 2020. We once had Vision 2020, and we've gone beyond 2020 now. How will you describe the approach to long-term planning in Nigeria, in Africa, and why do you think there are plans on table, there are plans in paper, but in reality, there's disparity?
Well, I also want to believe that when you're talking about a long-term plan, that you're not talking in terms of what we used to have, they call development plans in the early 60s and the early 70s, that has to span 20 years, 30 years. Today, really, when people are talking about long-term plan, the maximum is between 3 and 5 years. The real reason is that we are living in a very volatile world. The management experts call them, we live in a vocal world. VUCA, V for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Now, this is a world where every country, every business play, where technology is changing every other day, where knowledge is increasing exponentially. Now, if you have a plan that is too long, you will be taken up by events. So what people are doing really today is looking at, not too long a plan, but to see that we're actually focusing on a particular direction where you can channel your energy and put things in place for things that you can easily and quickly achieve. But like people always say, Nigerians, we are not lacking in anything written in paper. The only challenge has always been the challenge of implementation. How do we ensure that what we have written, we play by it? That's the problem. You see, there's always this competition between urgency and things that, of course, are legal here in this environment. We want to always do things urgently, urgently. We don't plan very well and execute with utmost efficiency and effectiveness. So this is a real problem. So the problem for us as a nation is more with implementation than actually with planning. And I think this is where this particular government needs to actually grow a lot of competence so that in terms of implementing whatever that is written down, the document, that we follow it religiously to see that we achieve that goal. But that comes with a lot of flexibility so that as the international environment is changing, as the dynamics of the economy is changing, we are not still fixed with what is written. So we also must be flexible enough to adjust to the reality of the current day.
Some economic analysts have argued that the reason some long-term plans of government has failed is because there wasn't a stopgap plan to make provision in the interim. So in the long run, it's either the people suffered too much or the vacuum that was created hampered the success of the long-term plan. Do you agree?
Well, I agree to some extent. When you look at the concept, for example, of governance as it's been propagated by Institute of Directors, we're told that, of course, as part of framework for governance is also risk management. It's not just a stopgap plan, it's risk management. To be able to scan your environment so deeply that you can estimate the likely risk that can make your plan not to succeed. And once you are able to isolate or identify potential risks that can impact on your core objective, then you will be able to actually work out alternative routes to reaching the same goal. And this, most of the time, we don't take very serious. And I think that the government itself must also incorporate ISO 31000 in its planning such that we can look at possible risk and what steps that can be taken to mitigate this risk so that the set goal are not hampered.
All right, Hidalza, thank you for your analysis. It's always a pleasure having you around. We'll go on another break now and we'll return to have more discussion. It's getting bigger, it's getting better, and it's getting more engaging. And that is after this short break. Stay with us.
Many thanks for being there. All right, now let's move to budget deficits and debt management. That's one issue that Nigeria has talked about for quite some years now, and it's also something that followed into this new administration. Although a new budget has not been made, the current administration is working on the one for the year fiscal budget for 2024. But the issue of budget deficits, what actually results to, we still have it also in the studio, by the way, you should know that. So what actually results to a country having budget deficit? And when it becomes a recurring thing from one year to another, you have budget deficit. So how does that impact the performance of the budgets?
Well, when you hear the word budget deficit, what should come to your heart is that you have made a plan of purchases in a fiscal year and your revenue is not enough to buy the things you want to buy. So how do you fulfill the obligations that you have put for yourself? Is that you are going to borrow. This is what it's always about, that we have a plan and you put a plan on your expenditure and your revenue, and you have a situation where your revenue cannot cater for your expenditure. Now, this is the situation where we have found ourselves as a country for a very long time, that we are borrowing every year to fund the budget because you don't have enough revenue to be able to pay for the services that you procure.
In the year 2022, which was last year, as far as the budget is concerned, Nigeria experienced a deficit of about 6.2 trillion.
Yeah.
Now, talk to us, because the gap has been raising funds locally. Why is this so challenging for Nigeria as a nation to fund its own budget without borrowing? And what are the strategies that can be deployed locally to, start generating more revenue in order to bridge this gap for?
Well, again, I'll pull you a little back to Ray Dalio's work, which is, of course, the causes of wealth and poverty of nations. And one of these issues that you find that is there in the circle, which the world move around, is the fact that sometimes you see when you have a period of prosperity, you see that rather than begin to save and think investment, you will be expounding your bureaucracy. And this happened to Nigeria between the period of 2009 to 2014, early 2014, when we have a lot of oil boom. Now, money was coming into the country. Rather than thinking of how to multiply what continued to come, we were busy expending money. You remember those years, even the governors had to go to the court, even when the then finance minister advocated for a sovereign wealth fund, where we can keep the excess of this money so that in the period of scarcity, we will have what to fall back on. And the governor went up to the Supreme Court to say, it's our money, we have to share it. Now, what was the outcome here was the fact that bureaucracy was expounded. We took on so much load that when the crunch came, now the people you have employed, you can't sack them, for example. So you have to manage to keep them at work. Now, the revenue that is coming to you is not what used to come. Now it's smaller, and then you now have a bigger bureaucracy to deal with. And this is the real issue, and this is the situation where Nigeria finds itself at the moment. That we are spending so much money to service debt because we have to keep this bureaucracy. And this is why sometimes it really amazes me, especially when Labour, for example, engage with government and they say, oh, we want more money. But nobody is actually thinking, where is this money going to come from? Those things are not put on the table. And then governments are forced to make promises, either to increase salary or wages, and without examining other options, either to trim down on the size of bureaucracy, because every time people talk about size, they only talk about governance, that the cost of governance is high, and the House of Assembly is taking so much. But they are not looking at the bureaucracy. Take, for example, Nigeria, for example, have 1,316 agencies and departments. That's large and huge. What are they producing? They are all cost center. Only few of them are revenue centers. Now you have to cater for all this, even when you don't need them. The things that we can do with electronics, the things we can do with e-government, we are still doing them manually so that we can keep people at work, even when they are not productive. Labor will not want to retrench workers, but they will want increased pay. And they are not thinking about where the money is going to come from. And they just say government is wasting money, and therefore you have to increase our salary. This is the tragedy that Nigeria is in, and this is the problem we really need to deal with. Because if we have to come out of these issues of deficit budgeting, we must face the reality. It's either we are going to cut down the size of our bureaucracy so that the cost of government can go down. Otherwise, we must look for other alternatives to create wealth so that we will be able to meet up with the demand of this burgeoning bureaucracy.
Picking it up from the other alternative, which is creating wealth, how can government create wealth to reduce the need for borrowing and also address the issue of budget deficits?
Well, this is also a very fundamental problem. And this is where a lot of people are talking about issues with multiple taxation, which of course we speak to every day. Yeah. That of course government even need to make enough money to be able to sustain the little we are having. And therefore this is creating problem for businesses. So businesses are not really prospering. And this is why people are talking about how do we create an enabling environment for business to thrive. Reduce taxes, cut costs in doing businesses. This is the only way to go. Otherwise, we also need to invest in research and development, which of course does not really attract so much budget from our government. We need to fund research and development so that we can have cutting-edge, locally developed technology to solve our problems. And this is the only way we will be able to go about creating wealth. Otherwise, if we follow the same trajectory we have been going through, the problem is going to remain and it's almost same.
There's this argument by some experts that for a country like Nigeria to generate more revenue locally or domestically, there's a need to sell off some national assets. There's a need to turn some projects to a viable means of generating income. If a good example was that of assets like the TBS, and some other projects. What do you think, or what's your take about this?
Well, I don't see it as a really feasible alternative. Now, how many times are you going to sell TBS?
Because once they sell, they get the
You sell
money.
it 1 year. So after 1 year, what happened? See, this is of course, I heard this argument when ASU was having negotiation with the past regime and say, oh, we have national assets, sell them, it will be enough. Are they thinking that when you finish paying them this year, what will they sell next year to pay them? These are conversations that are not sustainable. And people must understand that when you are making a plan and putting something on the board, on the table, you must be able to project. That's why they are talking about strategic planning. How can we sustain this in the next 5 years, in the next 6 years, in the next 7 years? For me, the real way for Nigeria to go as we speak, government everywhere is going lane. Nigerians have to deliberately go lane. Now, but the argument is always this. No, we are already talking so much of unemployment. There's no employment. People don't have employment, and you want to reduce workforce. If you reduce workforce, we create more trouble. Not really, not necessarily. What you will do is that if you are able to trim the size of your workforce, that the work that technology can do that human beings don't need to do, which means you will be able to pay the people who are working well. As we speak, the people who are working, they are currently not being paid well. And so what they earn cannot take them home. And this cannot oil the wheel of the economy. Now, when you pay people well, they will be able to buy luxury goods. They will be able to pay for informal services. But we don't want to go that route because we are thinking that if you just trim civil service today, oh, everybody will die. We won't die. We will begin to look out for alternatives to survival. I said here before, when, of course, a conversation on how it's going to happen to workforce with the invention of humanoids and robotic happened in the UAE, the first thing that the government did in the UAE was to think how their civil servants had to get an exit strategy. They gave their civil servants in the UAE opportunity to go test their hands in business and gave them sabbatical option for 1 year.
Okay, would that approach not be equal to solving the problem in one area and creating another in a different area? For instance, if government has to trim its workforce, then it has enough money to pay for the wages of those who work. It probably has enough money for the budget, but a lot of persons will be out of job. Would that not increase insecurity, people looking for any available alternative to a means of livelihood?
Yeah, I agree with you. But you see, what I'm saying in essence is that it's either we are ready to solve our problem or we have to remain where we are. For me, if we are deliberate in solving our problem, which is a national problem, the problem of poverty, the only way to go is to have a government that is lean enough to be able to pay its workforce well and attract good brains who will drive the process of designing policies. Then we have efficiency in terms of revenue collection. You can imagine a situation, just check that out. If you look at the report of the second quarter, check what various industries collected and the cost of collection.
But
this is a problem.
I don't know other creative ways government can handle this issue. The issue of budget deficits became more when revenue from oil began to drop. What if government looks at other ways of generating revenue besides taxation? We have solid minerals, we have other things. And can that not be more creative than actually laying off some workers?
Now, when you are talking about to be able to get revenue from solid mineral, on this set, when Magwe Kefas was here, he said to you, it's a heavy investment. Where will government get money to invest in solid mineral? This is a real issue. Now, we have not been able to provide the right ecosystem that we really attract foreigners to come put their money in this environment because of security challenges. So this is the issue. Government has so much in its hand to deal with. For you to create that enabling environment, a whole lot of risk had to be taken. A whole lot of sacrifices had to be made. Now, if we are not willing to make sacrifices and we are thinking that money is going to fall down from the moon for us to develop, I don't think that option is sustainable.
All right, let's look at, we've been talking about this for a while now. Let's look at the factors responsible for budget deficit. Or in practical, maybe in economic terms, is it possible to avoid, not to, experience budget deficit? Has it been be the situation in other world or in other part of the world? Let's look at factors responsible for it as far as Nigeria is concerned, and then what can be done? What are the strategies that can be put in place to reduce the effect?
Now, there are a lot of factors that we will need to consider here. Number one, infrastructure deficits. Now, you need to build world-class infrastructure if people are to come to the environment to invest. Now, we have a lot of deficit in terms of infrastructure. This is a problem. Now, you have a lot of debt obligations already in your hands that you have to grapple with. Now, we're being told that over 90% of our total revenue is used to service the debt we already owe. This is a fundamental problem. Now, if you spend 90%, for example, of your revenue, which means what is left for you to spend in the next year is just about 2%. So this is where the real issues are. And this is why, of course, you see the current regime is talking about not borrowing more, but to see how to broaden the base, for example, for tax, so that a lot of people are captured in the net, and then government have to work within its means in solving its problem. But that will also involve, take for example, we're also dealing with a lot of issue of poverty. And that's why people are talking about interventions, social interventions. Oh, you have removed fuel subsidy. It's affecting everybody. Government need to intervene. Now, how do you intervene? You have to borrow money to intervene. Now, this is the issues that are responsible for the deficit. Now, this issue have to be faced frontally if the deficit situation or scenario must go.
All right, thank you very much, Dare. So now, while you were talking, you talked about government spending government not having enough to spend. But one of the issues that have been raised is that it's not necessarily about government borrowing, it's about what government is spending, what it borrows on. Now, to talk more on that, we have joining us via Zoom, Dr. Olusoye Ajuwon, who will be looking at fiscal policy and government spending. Good morning, Dr. Ajuwon.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Now, we've been talking about budget deficits and debt management. So, like I said, so the question for some has not actually been government borrowing, but what does government spend its borrowings on? Do you share that sentiment?
Yes, that is absolutely true. What is government spending the money, being borrowed on? You see, I always tell people that managing government is the same thing as what happened with one's income. When you look at it at the micro level, then you'll be able to understand what is happening at the macro level. Micro level in the sense that when you look at your own personal income as a family man, if you are borrowing money, to cater for consumption, the problem would be how will you be able to pay back? And that's the problem that Nigeria has created, on ourselves now. We have borrowed money to the tune where 90% of our resources is now servicing the debt. So if your income is not enough before, and that's why you are borrowing, and now 90% of your resources is now servicing the debt, how will you now be able to survive on 10%? So we can see that we are in a precarious situation, and which require a very, very solid and what's it called, fiscal discipline to take us out of where we had put ourselves. It's a very, very serious situation, but people really don't want to understand. It's as if government have access to unlimited resources. You see, the way we are in Nigeria, we are just like a little baby who does not want to know whether the father has money or not. All that matters to the baby is, Daddy, I need ice cream. And if Daddy cannot provide ice cream, we start crying. The baby does not want to know how the father is going to get money to buy the ice cream. That's the way we are behaving in Nigeria. And we need to start telling ourselves the bitter truth that Nigeria is a poor country and we need to manage our resources properly.
All right, talking about Nigeria, you emphasize that I'm sure that's debatable when you say Nigeria is a poor country. Some might not agree, some it's debatable. Is it about lack of funds or the willpower to generate more funds or to manage the funds? I want you to speak to this.
Yes, it is the access to the funds itself, the resources that Nigeria have. People believe that because we have oil and that with the oil revenue, Nigeria can solve all the problems. And, I'm always telling my students in class that let's look at the money that comes in through oil. Let's assume the whole money is going into the government purse. We know it's not going to the government purse. Let's multiply, our daily production, the price of the oil, multiplied by the number of days in the year. By the time you calculate that and divide it by the population, we realize that at the end of the day, each citizen will be averaging $200 or $300 in a year. So what can you do with $300? Let's assume it's $300. What can you do with $300 in a year? So when you look at that, you will know that Nigeria is very, very poor. So that's the mathematics I want all of us to do. Let's sit down. Let's look at the oil that we produce per day. Let's multiply it by the price of the oil and multiply it by 365 days. And now, when we get that, divide it by our population and see what we will get. If you can get anything above $300, then say I'm a liar. Then you will know that Nigeria is actually a poor nation, because that's our major source of foreign exchange. Then when we are talking about the labor force in Nigeria, one thing we have done is this. When we look at the percentage of government employees, I belong to a group where we have done this over and over. We look at the percentage of people working for government in Nigeria, fix our population. We realize that We don't even have up to 2% of the population. Meanwhile, when we look at what is happening in UK, when we look at the population of labor force, fix the population of UK, we are getting around 8%. But why is it that, you know, if the government is employing less than 2% or thereabout in Nigeria, why is it that government cannot pay that 2%? The truth is this: the labor force we have in Nigeria, what are they doing? Are they really doing the work that will generate the revenue for government to be able to pay the appropriate salary to the workers? You know, the way we do things in Nigeria is once you get a job with government, you believe, yes, you are settled. And you know, it's an entitlement mentality. You just sit down without doing anything. After all, at the end of the month, you will collect your salary without bothering how the government is going to get that resources to pay your salary at the end of the month. That's the problem we are having. You know, we are not being productive in this country. We just believe that government have access to unlimited resources. We need to start understanding just the way an individual collects salary, that's the way government also collects resources. And if you don't do anything, the way your salary rewards, if you don't work, in my religion I belong to, which is Christianity, if you don't work, you are not meant to eat. So the same thing with the country. If you are not productive, then where do you want the resources to be paid a salary for you? Where do you want it to come from? So we need to start telling ourselves that gospel truth.
All right, two things. I'm going to ask you two questions, but let's get the first one first, and that is shoring up revenue. Government, for now, majorly gets revenue from oil, but that is not enough to take care of the country. So how can government shore up revenue? And then the second one is you've talked about the workforce of the government not being productive enough. What kind of structure should or would have ensured that they are productive? Because it seems like it is based on the job description. If you go to the civil service, a lot of the things that they do are clerical. So what structure should be in process to ensure productivity that translates to revenue generation of the ministries and department agencies that government has?
Yes, to start with the number one point, when you look at the percentage of GDP that government is collecting as tax in this country, it's one of the least in the world. You know, it's between 6 and 8%. It used to be, you know, below, but now, you know, we are doing better. So government is generating between 6 and 8%. When in some country, government is generating between 30 and 40% of the GDP as tax. In Nigeria, government is only collecting between 6 and 8. So the starting point is the tax need to increase. So, you know, we need to, in fact, at whatever we need to do, government needs to be generating between 15 to 20% of the GDP as tax. So that's the starting point. So that's the way to go. We don't pay tax. And, you know, in this country, most especially the rich people, they don't pay tax. And, you know, when you look at the atrocity that has been happening in this country, you know, the oil, what's it called, they are the ones that are enjoying it, not the poor people. And, you know, it's the poor people that is giving them the opportunity to continue to be exploiting us. The poor people will say they must not remove subsidy. Why are the people enjoying the subsidy? Is it not the rich people? Let me give you an example. One rich person went to the filling station to buy fuel into his car, one of his cars, one of his SUV, and he spent 60,000 naira to buy fuel. And I can bet it with you, he will not spend, you know, within 1 week, that fuel will finish. So if it was before, he would have paid 20,000 and government would have given him 40,000 naira subsidy, you know, to use his car. So at the end of the month, for that one car alone, government will be giving him 120,000 naira to maintain his car, you know, to fuel his car. That's one of his cars. He might have like 4 or 5 cars. So in the month, government will be giving him like 200,000 or more for not doing anything to government. And we are now saying, you know, the minimum wage is 30,000 naira. When we are paying rich people over 200,000 naira every month for not doing anything, for being rich. So those are the absurdities that we have in this country that must change. Thank God the subsidy has ended now. You know, people are importing things, people are buying things that they are supposed to be paying tax, they be giving them, you know, exemption. They be giving them tax holidays and things like that without properly looking at it. In what ways Because if you want to give somebody tax holiday or whatever, it must be so that it will encourage productivity. But, once you are rich, you enjoy. The poor are the ones that should be laying the golden egg. Those are the issues that we need to look at. And when you look at, the second point that you raised, that, most of the staff are clerical, is the mentality of the ones you call the labor force in Nigeria. If we know that this is like a business, that money must be generated, if you have that mentality, then with that mentality, things will change. So don't tell me that, the work of, civil servants are clerical or whatever. No. They are supposed to go with the mindset that, yes, I have to make things work. When things work, that is when money will come into the country and will make a better life. So with the way you are working your work, you have to do it in such a way to encourage productivity, not to discourage productivity. People will go to the ministry and they'll be spending hours or days on something that can be resolved within 5 minutes. Those are the things that is affecting productivity. If you don't bribe, if you don't want it, they won't allow you to grow. They will frustrate your enterprise. They are now saying we are poor, and you are telling me that it's clerical work. It's the mindset, it's the mentality of the civil servants in Nigeria. We are supposed to have the mentality of a business orientation, that things must work to be able to generate more revenue. When we have that mentality and we are working with that mentality, money will start flowing.
All right. The Fiscal Responsibility Act spelled out that there's a need to keep budget deficits under 3% of the GDP. That of Nigeria, as we speak, with the figure released last year, is a little bit above 3%. Can you speak to us? How can we maintain a healthy benchmark so that Nigeria will enjoy a better economic growth and development when it comes to the benchmark for our budget deficit compared to what is being spelled out in the Fiscal Responsibility Act?
You see, when we are talking about debt and GDP ratio, in fact, some people will tell you that Nigeria debt is far, far below, the standard and all those things. You see, what they are not looking at is Nigeria, debt GDP ratio cannot work because the tax we are collecting from GDP is how much? So where, they are saying that 3% of GDP is an economy where the tax is working well, where government can be collecting minimum of 15 or 20% of the GDP. So if that operates, that is where, 3% debt ratio will work. But in Nigeria, we are supposed to be looking at government revenue fixed at fixed debt ratio, not GDP. And that's a mistake we are making. If you are looking at GDP debt ratio, we will think that, yes, we have big room, we have wide room to borrow. Meanwhile, when you want to pay that money back, it is government that is paying the money back, not the GDP. I've been saying it, the amount that government is collecting as tax is about the least, one of the, lowest in the world. You are paying, you have 6 to 8% GDP, and now your debt ratio is over 3% GDP. You are already creating room for a serious problem, because it's like, you have an income of, let's say 100 naira, and your debt servicing is already consuming 90 naira. So how will you survive on 10 naira? So now to add the leeway, to be able to have more room, the best thing government needs to do at this level is to increase the tax rate. How they are going to go about it, it's for government. I'm not in government, but it's their duty to ensure that people that are not paying, their tax, they get it out of them.
All right, in increasing taxation, isn't government supposed to do one part or one duty to ensure that it is not just in increasing taxation, there is the ability of the business or the businesses to pay the taxes? Let's look at government spending again. The areas government allocate funds to, are there priority areas that government should allocate spendings to that will make those areas more productive and make the ability of businesses or the industries from that sector to pay tax more feasible?
Yes, you can see what the present dispensation are, working into. I've been working at the Minister of Solid Mineral Resources, came out and said that that's the reason why, he has the president to put him in that, what's it called? Because there's a lot of revenue in solid minerals in this country, and we only pay attention to the oil. Look at in Zamfara, they have gold there. There are so many mineral resources in the north, and what they are doing is they are just, exploiting it within themselves, doing illegal mining. So I think government needs to do a lot in the area of mineral resources to ensure that those resources are annexed and the appropriate, resources, appropriate, what do you call, there is a term we use for mineral resources, the rents and all those things is coming into the government purse. So we have to ensure that all the resources we have in this country are annexed properly so that government can collect the rent appropriately from all those resources. That's one way. Then number two, we need to look at what we are very good at doing, what our cultures and all those things. You can see in this part of the country, we are very good at entertainment. Government should look at the entertainment industries and see how they can come in to actually develop it well and, maximize the resources that can come in from it. So we need to look at all those things we are very good at doing and let government come in, develop it, and as well ensure that they maximize, government's return in those sectors.
All right, let's talk about this issue of budget performance. Over the years, the ratio or the statistics for Nigeria has not been impressive when it comes to budget performance. And you have situations that money are not being returned, after that fiscal year. Now that Nigeria is planning for 2024, what are the suggestions you can put on the table to ensure that we improve our budget performance and then adequate management of resources or money that have been budgeted for?
I'm always involved in budget preparation, and I know what is happening there. Now it is very, very difficult for anybody not to return, the money into the government purse, into the government cover at the end of the year. Anybody trying that, you are already, signing for jail, because if you are caught, you can't escape it. But when you look at the problem we are having, with the budget performance, it is actually increasing these days. It still comes down to what I was saying about the civil servants' mentality to work, because everything still comes down to civil servants. They are the one that have this budget. They are the one to work with this budget. And whatever they do is what we see at the end of the year. If at the end of the year we say, okay, we want this budget of this amount, then, if at the end of the year we are having 40%, 60% performance of the budget, then ask the civil servants. They are the one that didn't do what they are supposed to do. Then not only that, another problem we are having with the budgeting in this country is that we are not being realistic on, what we base the budget on. Because when you are saying that, okay, this revenue is coming, you look at the situation of things in the country properly, you are expecting revenue that will come in from oil. When you know what is happening in the oil industry, and based on that, you put your budget that, okay, you will spend this money. And when it is time to spend the money, the revenue has not come in. So how will you be able to implement the budget when there is no money, to implement the budget? So those are the issues, with the budget planning and budget implementation. So we need to align to ensure that, our budget is appropriate, that is, it meets the need, meets the demand, or rather, the supply meets the demand. We need to ensure that the resources that we cater for what you have budgeted for is on ground. If not, what we are seeing now is what will continue to be seen. But what is always happening is when it is time to implement the budget, to realize that the resources is not there, and that's what is creating the problem. It's not about, it was in the past. what the civil servants normally do is they will not allow the budget to come out early enough, so that when it was towards the end, they will now rush, so that at the end of the day, they will say they made mistakes, and they'll be able to appropriate something to their own personal pocket. But that is being taken care of now with the all these technology innovations that we are putting into the budget planning and implementation. The GIBMITs, the IPPIS, the single treasury accounts, and all those things. So before you can spend any money, it must be approved.
Okay, let's look at fiscal policies of government. Taking, for instance, the social investment programs. We have some social intervention programs. Now, some people see that as a waste of money for government, maybe because they're looking at the process of distribution of some of this social investments and how it may not get to the grassroots or to the vulnerable people. They tend to look at it from the angle of teaching a man to fish rather than giving him fish. So do you see that as one way government is not effectively appropriating some of its resources?
You see, that is how we are getting it wrong. Because when you look at what we are implementing in Nigeria, it's not, it's something that has been done in so many parts of the world, and it is working. So I see no reason why people are always, working against what government is doing. We are the one holding ourselves down in this country. Government says they want to give 8,000 to people, certain number of millions of people for 6 months. And people are like, what is 8,000 naira? And, and all those things. By the time, those 8,000 naira get to where, the government wants to put it, you realize that 8,000 naira matters a lot. But you see, it's a noble policy that we are supposed to allow to work. But Nigerians, because of lack of trust and all those things, and the people getting it, some will say that they don't know anybody. You must know the people getting it. The data is there. They've collected the data. They have the ones they want. Let them implement it. But no, it is a way of what's it called? Political rewarding the people that voted or whatever that canvassed. That's the way we are always interpreting things in Nigeria. Instead of us, if you are interested in it, go into the field, go into the communities and go and ask the people that are enjoying. What's the job of the NGOs? So instead of us castigating, the government policy, we are supposed to be ensuring that this thing actually is working. It's not by stopping it. It's not by destroying it before it starts. It is by ensuring that truly they say they are spending this money. These are the people getting it and all those things. Not by sitting down in the corner of our room and destroying the government policy. It's a noble policy that should be allowed to work. They are doing it in so many parts of the world, and it is working. And it will work in Nigeria if you allow it to work.
Talking about generating more revenue locally, there's this argument or school of thought that maybe if Nigeria will have to start selling some of its assets, we'll have to some projects, viable projects, to generate more income, to generate more revenue locally. I would like to have your take on this school of thought or this argument that selling of assets could also bring revenue apart from taxes and all that.
Yes, especially in the situation we have found ourselves now. Nigeria needs to sell some assets, to have a lean room, a free room to be able to operate properly. A good example is all our refineries. I always ask when people are saying that our refineries needs to be working, government has not. It is not the duty of government to be operating refineries. I am saying it again. It is not the duty of government to be operating refineries. Those are the channels through which, they are draining our resources in this country. All our resources, all our refineries, they are supposed to be sold, not spending money in, renovating them. They are supposed to be sold. I am saying this and I keep saying it. We don't need to be spending money on refineries. We are supposed to sell them. Let private individuals, let companies, let firms who knows how to operate refineries profitably, take over those refineries and let them be the one doing the job. It's not the duty of government. It has nothing to do with government.
Let's look at the some of the ways government generates revenue apart from oil sector. The non-oil revenue comes from taxes, custom duties, and even grants. So taking custom duties, for instance, how can government increase revenue that comes from custom duties? Because what we find is that some importers would rather use the ports of neighboring countries rather than come through, have their products come through Nigerian ports. What are the issues and how can they be addressed?
Yes, that's one area which, government needs to be generating a lot of revenue. Why are importers preferring to import their, what's it called, using foreign countries to import when we have a better, well-equipped, port in Nigeria? So those are the areas where civil servants are not doing their duty. They are not doing their work. You see, if you go to Cotonou, what you will spend 3 weeks to clear in Nigeria, in 3 hours, we will clear it in Cotonou. So why will I not go to Cotonou? So these are the things we need to be looking at. Why are people using Cotonou instead of using Nigeria? So what's special about Cotonou? What are they doing right that we cannot do right? That's the mentality of our civil servants in Nigeria that needs to be corrected. So there is no need for any importer to be using any other countries to import their goods that is coming into Nigeria. We are supposed to be using our port. But when you want to use the port, before you get to your goods, some have been stolen, or something that is supposed to take 1 hour, you are using 60 days. And yet you are still, and they will start asking you to start paying demurrage. So these are the things that needs to change. If you go to a port and go and refurbish the process completely from the bottom to the top to ensure that even foreigners will now start using Nigeria port instead of Nigeria using foreign ports.
All right, we are due for a short break now. We'll go on a break now. And when we return, we'll return to have more discussion with Dr. Ajiwan. Stay with us.
All right, many thanks for being there. We're still looking at budget deficits and debt management, even as we also take a look at fiscal policies and government spending. Because when government says it has to borrow, a lot of times people ask, what are you borrowing for? So this is some of the issues that we've been looking at with Dr. Ajuwon, who will again join us for the look at the discussion. But there is one aspect of it. There is one aspect that we need to also look at, and that is infrastructure development. Because if businesses are to thrive, then of course the necessary infrastructure to support the businesses to thrive have to be there, because Ajuwon was emphatic when he talked about tax increasing. Government needs to increase taxation. Then government has to make it possible for these businesses to operate and thrive so that they can pay the taxes. Because if government increases taxes without providing these things, then some businesses will have to shut down.
Part of the submissions made by Dr. Ajuwon when we were speaking with him, he talked about, it's debatable. It talks about selling off of some national assets. Earlier we had Idauza who talked about, who feels is not comfortable with the idea of, or the school of thought saying that the federal government should sell off some assets. Now you have Dr. Ajuwon saying that's the way to go. For instance, he talked about the refineries. Nigeria have about 4 refineries, and they've been performing below expectation, since these refineries have been created. Now you have a situation where you keep spending money, budgeting money every year. The recent one is that of Port Harcourt, which we are hoping before the end of the year, it will come back to business. You keep spending money on this project, on these resources, and yet you're not making any return, any gain. And in fact, if you look at these refineries over the years, the technology has gone obsolete. These refineries were built in the 60s. Now you have that of Dangote coming on board, Now the question is, if an individual could come up with that kind of initiative, why will a government entity not be able to sustain its refineries? And that's why there's this argument that to raise more revenues, hand over these refineries, concession them to private individuals or private businesses who would take charge of these refineries. The government will make money. There's also this argument that government doesn't need to, there's no need for government to be in business, because in this part of the world you discover that with government, businesses seem not to be doing as expected as when you have that of individual. And that is example being said by Dangote refinery. So that's the argument that, to show up revenue, to increase revenue, apart from taxing people, Nigerians are dealing with multiple taxation already. You're paying this, you're paying that, and there are some you don't even understand why you're paying. But even the tax net has not been extended to even the larger majority, especially the rich. You have VIPs, or some people are not paying what they ought to pay. So that's why someone like Dr. Ajuwon was coming up with the argument that Nigeria, even with the present reality, the way to survive is to, sell off some of our assets so that Nigeria will generate more revenue. And I'm happy the president, the first thing he did when he came on board was to remove subsidy, which was what has been siphoning money over the years. It's mind-boggling to understand that, like in Nigeria, we spend about 400 billion monthly, on subsidy. It's not sustainable. By the time you calculate that in a year, it's enough to fund our budget, and this is part of the argument. All right. Atlanta, we have Dr. Ajuwon now. Dr. Ajuwon, glad to have you join us once again. Oh, okay. Well, while we're still trying to reconnect with Dr. Ajuwon, we'll go on a short break.
Before we do that, quickly, let's look at some other issues when it comes to the issue of government not having any business in business. Take, for instance, what Dr. Ajuwon talked about, how the government should not be the one managing refineries. Well, I think we can use the case of Saudi Aramco, which is like our own NNPCL in Nigeria. Now, while the NNPC focuses on the sale of crude oil, if the NNPC could have taken on the aspect of managing refineries as well, and that would have worked very well. But I don't think necessarily it's about government not being able to manage business. I think it's about the attitude of government and some of government workforce towards business. Because if you have a an agency like the NNPC, and you also have the refineries, there hasn't been a problem with the NNPC selling crude. Why should there be a problem with the NNPC managing refineries? Because, yes, you can have refineries that are maybe given to private individuals to manage or even sold to them. But because we know how important petrol is, we know how important fuel is, it should be looked at as a social good in some form. And we should also have government take operation of some of this, because this is something that is very critical to every sector. See how the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy impacted businesses and even people. So I think government can also manage its refineries, as well as you can open the window, you can open the door rather, and you can even have other people come into refining business, having refineries. We have modular refineries, so that's one way that can also help. All right, so Dr. Ajuwon is back. Welcome back, Dr. Ajuwon.
Thank you.
Okay, let's look at foreign direct investment, government attracting foreign direct investment. What are the ways to go about it? How can government attract more foreign investment, direct investment, and even sustain it? We've also seen that some companies some businesses that had their operations here in Nigeria had to relocate. Some of the reasons that they gave was the difficulty in repatriating funds. Some of them had issues with power, and so it made the production become more expensive. How can we attract and sustain foreign direct investment in Nigeria?
You see, when we look at what is happening in Nigeria, you will see that we are in a critical situation, and what is causing this problem is because, we are highly intelligent, we are highly hardworking, but we are not challenging our, all these good attributes into productivity. When you look at what you are consuming in Nigeria, you will see that the greater percentage of what you are consuming are being imported. And what are the things we are producing that we are exporting? So we will see that there is a misalignment between import and export. Majorly what we export in Nigeria is our crude oil. And we want to import virtually everything. And that is why Nigeria currency, the Naira, is losing value on a daily basis. See, when you look at the clothes we are wearing, the phone, the automobile, everything we are using is being imported. What are the things that we are exporting, to cater for those things we are importing? So definitely, there is a misalignment, and that is why, the foreign exchange we are generating, these are fixed what we are spending is, is like 10% to 100%. I'm sorry about that. But the truth is this: until we start being productive, all the things that we can, produce in this country that we are importing, we need to look at them. And that is why, the previous administration said that, okay, we are not going to be giving foreign exchange to this and this and these commodities, because we believe that we are supposed to be producing them. How can we be importing chicken? How can we be importing tomato paste? How can we be importing all these agricultural rice and all those things?
Dr. Ajuwon, we're almost out of time on this discussion, but quickly, in a minute, could you talk about foreign direct investment, and in what way would that help to show up revenue for the government as we wrap this up?
You see, FDI is a way of bringing foreign exchange into the country. But when you look at the insecurity in the country, fixed are fixed. Even if I come in, it will be difficult for me to repatriate my profit. Will anybody who want to come into the country to come and invest here? So you see, these are the issues that we need to start looking at the solution for. Number one, let's look at the issue of insecurity. How can we solve the insecurity? Because where there is no security, there can't be prosperity. So for us to attract FDI, The first thing we need to do is to ensure that the security is paramount in this country. In an area where there is no security, there can't be improvement. So the way
All
we
right,
are in
Dr.
Nigeria,
Ajimo.
we should stop deceiving ourselves in attracting FDI. When people, there's insecurity and people cannot repatriate their profits. So it is a no-go area for now. But definitely the current government is trying their best to ensure that they attract the FDI and give them all the succor, all the what you call they need. But believe me sincerely,
All right,
we need
doctor.
to tell ourselves in-house that we need to work on insecurity in the country.
Dr. Ajimo, thank you so much for your submission. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. What a way to wrap up this discussion. Now we've saved the best, which is for the last, so they say. And another conversation is coming up. It's exclusive. What is it going to be? Who is it going to be? You get to know after this short break.
Value is the essence of worth, the measure of significance. There are arguments from experts suggesting that for developing countries like Nigeria to revamp its economy, improve social cohesion, redeem its international reputation amongst others, it must pay critical attention to instilling a strong value system back into every level of the nation. For African countries to be able to hold its own in the community of nations, now and in the future, shifting the narrative from economic victims to our resource-rich and assertive partners, it would have to look at making policies consistent with its future goals. Nigeria, like other African nations, would have to do more than going cap in hand to every summit to have whatever pittance the more advanced countries decide to hand down to her, and look at how she could attempt to solving its economic, fiscal, and monetary policies. It is not certain that things will change overnight, but by instilling a culture of strong value system that rewards honesty, merit rather than mediocrity, it has a stronger chance of providing a moral and ethical foundation for a nation's development, fostering unity, stability, economic growth, and social progress, ultimately the overall trajectory of nation building. Juvi Ufiene, Suk News.
Welcome to Souk Exclusive. Our guest today is Sunday Adilaja, who is the founder and senior pastor of the Embassy of the Blessed Kingdom of God for All Nations, an evangelical charismatic megachurch in Kyiv, Ukraine. Now, at a time where people are struggling to read, this man has authored over 400 books. That's to tell you how much he intends to pass knowledge on to people and develop them, because knowledge is power. They just gave you a tip of the iceberg. Now, after the report done by Juvi Ofiene, the one that talks about policy and value, let's see how this can translate to national prosperity. We had an exclusive interview yesterday with Dr. Sunday Adilaja on Souk Exclusive. So let's have the interview, and that will take us to the end of Early Exchange. Many thanks for watching, but you need to see this interview. Femi.
For me, it was an eye-opening engagement with Sunday Adelaja. You know, he's well-read. He's an author of over 400 books.
Yes.
And I find that to be commendable. And so I can't wait to. We're looking forward to this.
Yes, it's scintillating. So we'll leave you to watch the interview on a super exclusive that we had with Dr. Sunday Adilaja on policies and values and how it translates to national prosperity. Enjoy watching. Welcome to Souk Exclusive. Our guest today is Sunday Adilaja, who's the founder and senior pastor of the Embassy of the Blessed Kingdom of God for All Nations, an evangelical charismatic megachurch in Kyiv, Ukraine. Now, at a time where people are struggling to read, this man has authored over 400 books. That's to tell you how much he intends to pass knowledge onto people and develop them, because knowledge is power. Today, let's have Sunday Adilaja as we delve into his word and also the contributions he's made to the world through evangelism and other works that he's been doing. I'm not here alone to explore the word of Sunday Adilaja. Femi Ayodele is also in the studio.
He's a journalist, a writer, he author of so many books which have also blessed life and inspired a lot of young people across the world. So we're glad to have him. So let's delve into the discussion.
So what informed your decision to leave Nigeria? At what time exactly did you come to the conclusion that you needed to leave Nigeria? How has that impacted your life?
Well, I left Nigeria close to, going to about 40 years ago when I was 19. This was in the 80s. And that time, as a young graduate from secondary school, I just finished my WAEC, and I also did JAM. I got admission to the then University of Ife. I guess it's called Obafemi Awolowo University now. But even though I was living less than 2 hours away in Ogun State, I'm from Ogun State, so close to, in a village close to Ijebu-Ode. But can you believe this? I couldn't afford to even get myself a transport fare to go to collect my results from University of Ife, 2 hours away. So we were so poor, even for me to give my WAEC was a problem, where it was a relative that heard that I was not being permitted to the exam hall because I didn't pay for the WAEC form that just, came from nowhere and settled the 50 naira fee that was needed to pay for my exams. Otherwise, I would have even given the exam. So this was the situation when I was going through newspaper. Those days, you could just go through any newspaper and see advertisements of scholarships. So I was going through, I knew that there were opportunities in newspapers. So I knew that was my only chance. So every time I had an opportunity to lay my hand on newspapers, I would look for scholarships. And voila, I got one advertisement and I applied. And there were a lot of people, applying for this scholarship. For one place, we had 1,000 people. So we had 300,000 applications. They were only going to take 300 students for scholarship. So this is how I got my luck in life. And I got a scholarship to study in the former Soviet Union.
Dr. Adilaja, your story has been very inspiring to a lot of young people across the world. I would like you to talk about What do you think is responsible or the secret of your success? You are pastoring at a point in Ukraine before the war broke out, an all-white church, about 90 or 99% all-white. What will you attribute your success to, and what has been the secret over the years?
When I was growing up in my village, I used to curse and hate on my grandmother because I didn't know my father. I've never met him. And my mother, I didn't know her till I was a teenager because she had brought me back from her previous husband and dropped me with her mother and remarried. So she was married, and I was growing up with my grandmother. And she used to take me to the bush to get some firewood and then, get it arranged, put it on my head from Idomila, which was my village, to Ijebu-Ode in the morning before going to school. And then after school, the first thing was to go and fetch other set of firewood. And this was in hot sun, scorching sun of Ijebu. And so I used to curse her that, my God, why am I so unlucky in life? And why is life so difficult for me? But when I got to Russia, and my professor told me that I would never speak Russian language because without that, you would not be able to go into the university. You have to learn the Russian language 1 year before you go into the university. And he said, because I came late and I couldn't catch up with the class, he said, you will never speak this language. And I said, no, God will help me. He said, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. And I tell you, as your professor, you will never speak this language. If you ever do, I will become a believer. And so I said, okay, what will I do now? And I remembered that my sister had shared with me a scripture that in the book of Deuteronomy 28, verse 13, that says that you shall be the head and not the tail. You shall be you shall be first and not last. And I said, okay, so God has given me this promise. So what do I do now? So I vowed to God that I would do my best from today. I will work hard like I'd never worked hard before. And I said, after classes, I will not go to my dormitory, to my hostel. I will be going to the library. So from that day, we spent 7 hours or 6 in classes. After that 7 hours in classes, I normally will just go and take a lunch for 30 minutes, then go to the library. I will be in the library for the next 6 hours. And I did that for the next 7 years when I was in the university till I finished my master's. So I will always stay in the library. I would resist the temptation of going out. From Monday to Friday, I will spend 6 hours every day in the library. And then I became the best student of that university in their history, in their 25 years of history at that point. Why? Because of hard work. So I believed God, but I also worked hard. I think hard work is actually the womb of every success.
Wow, that's remarkable. Now, talking about believing in God.
I'm sorry. I'm going to complete my thought. So
okay,
the reason why I connected it to my grandmother was that this time when the professor told me I will never make it, I remember the suffering that I went through in the village. And I said, if I could survive it in Idomila, this studying in Europe in their library was like aircon. So much comfort. I've never seen this kind of comfort, even in the library or classrooms. I said, if I could survive it under the scorching sun of Africa, if I could survive it without 3 square meals, if I could survive it eating only eba and gari in all my life, this one with all this comfort. So I always refer back to my pain. My pain of the past propelled me. I will always remember that pain. And I say, I will never go back to that pain. So that pain that I endured made me to endure the lesser pain. So the greater pain of poverty, the greater pain of depravity that I had back in Africa propelled me to work hard so much that even as much as I worked, it was not as serious as the pain I was going through in Africa. So I think I'm saying that just to encourage my people back out at home who are going through poverty or pain or lack of different things, scarcity, that their pain could be the greatest secret of their success in life.
Okay, taking it from there, the concept of time. Now, you looked back to where you were coming from. And that motivated you to push forward to change things about your future. Let's bring it now to Africa. What have we gone through in the past as a continent that Africa is supposed to look back at, leverage that, use it as a motivation to change the fortunes of the future?
You see, people who are in Africa and who have been privileged to know how to read, how to write, to go to school, they should see themselves as chosen people, privileged people. Because in Nigeria, for example, about 50% of our people still cannot read or write. So we are actually, we who are able to read and write, we are the elite of our societies, especially those who have finished higher education, university. So we have to look at that as an opportunity to become a ladder and a bridge to our less fortunate countrymen and compatriots. So if God has given me opportunity to even be able to read, how am I using that ability to read other than for myself? Could I just organize a class for adult education for people who cannot read or write? Anything we know, we should be using, we should be sharing it with people who don't know what we know. So if I have any insight in anything, if I have any skill, why don't I use my weekends or my Saturday, my Sunday to gather young people and share the skills that I have? If we will be our brothers' keepers, if we will take our time to share whatever we have with people who don't have as much near us, Africa will become a greater place rather than just waiting for the government or the president to come and resolve all our problems for us.
Africa records millions of people flocking to religious organizations, religion activities, events, church activities. Yet, our continent or society is still ravaged with corruption, impunity, and all that. Talk to us about the missing links and what can be done to fix them. Why do we have this kind of development in Africa in spite of our religious disposition?
Well, one of the greatest problems that we are facing is that we have embraced Christianity as a religion, but not as a way of life. So what we are doing is that we are going to church that's become like a culture for us now. And we go to church, and then when we go to church, we pray to God that God should come and help us resolve our problems. Well, that is why I wrote my book that you people probably have heard about, that only God can save Nigeria. No, what a myth. It's a myth to think that God will come and save Nigeria. I mean, people who don't believe in Christianity, like Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirates, Kuwait, all those are Muslim countries. They didn't wait, just pray. In America, England, Germany, France, they didn't wait for God to come and build their countries for them. They used the principles of the Bible, the principles of hard work, the principles of dignity of labor, the principles of integrity, the principles of faithfulness in little, the principles of productivity, principles of process of production. And all those principles are from the Bible. They took those principles and build them as principles to engineer them to build a better society. But what we have done is that we have taught our people to pray and to wait on God to come and do for them what they could do for themselves. It's a tragedy, actually. Religion has become our hindrances, a hurdle in our development, unfortunately. Religion is supposed to propel us, supposed to be our propeller, but it has become a hurdle in the path of our growth.
In reference to your book, The Value-Driven Nation, you're the author of that book. Taking a clue from the lessons and some of your submissions as regards the value-driven nation, I would like you to talk about how Nigeria, and by extension Africa, be a value-driven nation, and by extension Africa being a value-driven continent.
Very good question. Number one, for us to be value-driven, we must realize that values are cultivated in the homes. So government need to develop a program, a national program that will encourage parents to teach their children the right value systems. And we have to even give them a list of the values that we want to inculcate into our family, into our children, into our future, into our society as a fabric. That's number one. We must, teach and intentionally encourage parents to inculcate values in their children. Number two, for us to be a value-driven country, we must know that our educational system must not just teach physics and biology and geography. We must begin to teach in our schools values. We must go back to the days where we used to have civic education or ethics. In Europe, they call it ethics. We must begin to teach ethics and begin to, have as a nation, we must have a list of value systems that we want to be the basis of our society and of our country as a whole. It is values that develop nations. And until we come up with those lists of values, I have developed such lists of values. In my book, Nigeria and the Leadership Questions, I enumerated all those values that Nigerians need for development. But also, apart from the schools, apart from educational system, apart from the family, another institution that is responsible for formation of values are the religious organizations. Our pulpits are responsible either for, for propagating the right values or the wrong values. There are some mosques, for example, where people are in other parts of the world, where people have used pulpit to propagate jihad. And see what people are doing. People began to go and kill themselves, and others. That is the power of pulpit. But if we are going to use that same pulpit to propagate the right values, we will be able to build a wonderful country, just like the Europeans did. In Europe, it is what they call the Protestant ethics that are responsible for the European or modern civilization that we are enjoying today. The Protestants, people like Martin Luther, people like all the other reformers, they embrace values of the Bible and brought them out of the four walls of the church and propagated them in the society as a whole. And those values that are called Protestant values are responsible for what the Europe that we see today.
Okay, we live in a time where there is so much external influence. First of all, there is the influence of the Western practice, Western culture on the African culture, and then the exposure to other way of life through social media. So how can Africa handle this? How can homes, schools, and even government handle this to shape the values of Africans to one that's encouraging certain virtues that will result to nation building, or by extension, the building of Africa?
Well, the Bible says somewhere in Proverbs that teach a child in the way that he should go, and that when he's grown up, he will not depart from that path. So the foundation is very important. If the foundation we give to ourselves, our children, our families, from home and from our native nations are good, just like I referred back to the foundation of hard work that was given to me by my grandmother, it propelled me in future to success. And it never left me because it was inculcated into my system from childhood. So whatever we put into into the foundation of character building of our children, of the society as a whole, will stand the test of time against the pressure that is coming from outside. But also, some of the values that are coming from outside are not negative always. Some of them are positive. So we should also learn to derive from the developed countries what are some of these principles that have helped them to grow and to become so developed, so that we will be able to embrace some of those as well.
As a social reformer, an author of many books, and someone who has traveled across the globe, I would like you to do a comparison of the value system in Africa to that of Europe and other continents, and because you talked about the value system, I would like you to do a comparison and let's see what Africa can do better.
Okay, for example, let me say that is a very good question, and I think this illustration will help me to pass my message across. The Bible says that righteousness or doing things right exalts a nation. Whenever you see a nation where people have been taught to obey rules and laws and principles, when they have been taught to obey rules, those nations are always exalted. When people have been taught to do things right, either they're Christians or non-Christians, believers or non-believers, just learn to do things right, those nations will always be developed. For example, there is a famous pastor in Nigeria that everybody knows. If I mention his name, everybody will know him. And he is the one who told this story. Maybe some people have heard this story. He was traveling from Nigeria to England through the Heathrow airport. And when he got to the airport, he was stopped. And because he had a Nigerian passport, so they were saying, "What are you coming to do in Great Britain today?" And he told them, "I'm a pastor. I'm coming to see my churches here." And they said, "Okay, if you're a pastor, yesterday was Sunday. What did you preach? What was the topic that you preached yesterday?" And he said, "Oh, I can tell you, but I'm a pastor. I cannot lie." Then the custom officer said, "Oh, you are a pastor? Yes. You cannot lie because of that?" "Yes, I'm a pastor. I cannot lie." So the woman said, it was a woman, said, "So you are telling me because you are a pastor, you will not lie or you cannot lie. So naturally in your country where you are coming from, it means if you are not a pastor, then, you could lie. Or people who are not pastors, because they are connected to God, they could lie. But in this country that you are coming to, you don't need to be a pastor not to lie. Everybody doesn't, you are not supposed to lie. People don't lie here. And this is the difference. If you come to Africa, for example, you will see so many people who go to church. A large number of people who call themselves believers, but they could lie, they could steal, they could, all the corrupt people we are talking about, they'll go to one church or mosque or the other. But in Europe, you don't see people going to church so much. They might not go to church, but it has been imbibed in their society. Their society has been formed in such a way that truth, honesty, integrity has become part of the fabric of their country. So if we could succeed in intentionally teaching our people, everybody out of religion, that honesty is the best policy, that truth, love for truth is the path to righteousness and to elevation, then we will begin to see the rapid growth that we never anticipated. Because right now, no matter what the government does, somebody is stealing it. Even I heard that the railways that the government is building, some people are going to steal the rails. So what can you do now? Because of the lack of that vital quality, which is truth, love for truth, integrity, and righteousness in our people. Our people must learn to do things right, even if they don't go to church.
As a follow-up to that question, talking about the concept and disposition and orientation of Africans to timing or time compared to the Western world. In this part, there's a word you talk about African time or African timing. Talk to us about why this is significant, the orientation, the attitude towards time and timing. What's our conception about the issue of timing as far as African continent compared to the Western world?
You are so, either you've read some of my books or something, because this question you are asking, I wrote a whole book about it, and it's called How to Make Every African Country a First World Country. And in that book, I made calculations of how Nigeria's GDP could be doubled or tripled just by doing one thing, by abiding by time. Because, for example, if you take one person, let's say an average worker is making $10 an hour, just as an example, I don't know what they're making, let's say $10 an hour. And we averagely in Nigeria, everybody comes late to everywhere, at least maybe 1 hour. 1 hour goes late, 1 hour to school, goes late, 1 hour to work, goes within the whole day, 24 hours a day, our people could wait 3 hours just coming late. Now multiply that 3 hours by if 3 hours is $10, just make it it means $30 in a day, $30 into 26 days in a month, and then multiply that by 275 days in a year. You know, by the time I made all the calculations, the Nigeria economy, just by dealing with lateness alone, could be a $1 trillion economy. That is the importance of work because of time. Because time is not just money, time is life, time is productivity. Time, some people are producing, something in every hour. Some people are producing something in every minute, whereas we are wasting an hour going late to a place of production. And you are very correct. It's something that we must really declare war against in Africa.
Okay, as much as we must declare war on lateness in Africa and encourage timeliness, there are values that need to be encouraged or rewarded for it to become something people embrace. Because over time, people have lost these values. Some persons did not even grow up with a value. Some persons grew up with the mindset of there is African time. In fact, the only place people respect time is maybe for school or work. Outside that, African time applies. Now, you talked extensively before the time issue about honesty, certain values that should be encouraged in Africa, integrity, honesty. How can nations encourage this, reward it, so it becomes something people do? Because for those who naturally, or maybe by their upbringing, will want to be honest, but it seems that there is no reward for it. I don't know, it seems like you're foolish. So what should change at the national level and then at the continental level to encourage certain values?
Very, very, very good question. The problem with values and living by values is that, especially honesty and integrity, the problem with it is that it's not a short period kind of, it's not a short-term result. Normally, when you live by values, it's in the long run, you see the result of it. But most people want to have a short-term result. They want to have a quick fix. They want to have instant gratification. And that instant gratification is our undoing. Whereas values demands endurance. Values demand stamina. They demand perseverance. And it is only after that that you are normally rewarded. But really, at the end of the day, you know, if you are my customer and you come to buy things from me, I always sell it for you higher than the normal price, or I normally reduce something, take from it, and you get a smaller weight instead of the original weight. One day, that deception will come back to bite me, because you will realize that I've been deceiving you. And once the truth comes out, you will tell your friends, I will not just lose you, I will lose all your family members, I will lose all the people you know, who you will tell that I'm a shit. So in that case, on the other hand, I've been a person of integrity. I've always been doing, selling things at the right price. I've always been giving you the right weight. I've always been, then you will say, okay, go to that other person, because that other shop is where the person is a man of integrity. It never cheats. So it takes time for integrity to play out. But at the end of the day, people who live by any other values other than the value of honesty, integrity, and truth, they always lose out. But if there is no quick fix to it. It takes perseverance, and the only way to make people to embrace this is to teach it and enforce it from childhood. For example, another problem in Nigeria is that no matter the offense, people always find a way to look to avoid punishment. So this is a big problem. I will tell you a story, a small problem that will help me to communicate this my lesson. When I was a student in Russia, I went to Germany on holiday, and then we, in Nigeria, we never obey the traffic light. So I saw that it was red, the traffic light was red, but I and my friend, we were thinking, but there is no car now, no car here, no car to the right, no car to the left. We just say, okay, let's cross. From nowhere, we saw police come and stop us. I said, where did they come from? We didn't see them. Anyway, they told us we have to pay 10 euros. It used to be mark in those days, let's say euro. 10 euro penalty. So we said, oh, sorry, because in Nigeria, we're used to the fact that, I'm sorry for that, is ambulance passing by. So we're used to the fact that if you offend in something, just beg the authority and they will pity you. They will have mercy. So we say, oh, please, please, please. We are students. We are from Russia. We don't have 10 euro. They said, no, pay now. We said, no, please. Can we pay? Oh, please forgive us. They said, okay, 20 euro. I said, 20 euro, but please, now, no, we don't have, please, for the 30 euro. No, 40 euro. No, 40 euro. 50 euro. If you talk again, it will keep on going. That is how we ended up paying 50 euro issue. From saying we don't have 10, because they have a system that enforces the right things, enforces righteousness, that upholds justice, equity, and uprightness. So, but in Nigeria, even if somebody would have come, other people would say, oh, pity him now, oh, leave him alone now. The parents will come and say, oh, let him go. Even recently, some members of parliament will be coming to intercede for the person who is doing the wrong thing. Ministers will be calling to say, so we have a whole means of bypassing the law, of bypassing what is right, until we begin to enforce righteousness by force. Just like when you go to Singapore. In Singapore, everything attracts penalty. So penalty must be established for things to work in our country.
All right, Dr. Adelaja, the conversation with Dr. Adelaja still continues, but we'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll have more conversation with our special guest. Stay with us.
Thank you for staying with us on the issue of policy and value, as we've been talking with Dr. Sunday Adilaja, who's been talking extensively about policy and value and how Africa can achieve that. All right, Dr. Sunday Adilaja, we do know that there was a time when there was a kind of communal mentorship for children. A child doesn't belong to a particular family, the child belongs to the entire community. Is there a way to return to that kind of system where correction of a child is not left alone to the parents? A child could do something wrong and somebody from the community is correcting the child and even going as far as enforcing some form of punishment just to deter the child from returning to such behavior. What is the way to go in a time like this about that?
Thank you so much. That attitude, practice was popular back in Africa in those days when people had what is called taboos, when people had the things that are accepted by the community as a whole and the things that are not accepted. If we could go back to that, it will really help us a big deal. But unfortunately, before we could go back to that successfully, something must happen. We must collectively dethrone the reign of money, the supremacy of money in our society. Because right now, it's like anybody that asks money becomes the authority right now in our culture. In the olden days, it used to be you respect your elders, and the rules, the accepted norms of the society take preeminence over money or any status that anybody might have. Let me tell you a story that to help bring this point home. I have a friend of mine who is a professor. He's from the eastern part of Nigeria, and because he's over 60 and he's now the eldest in his family, in his clan. So when they were having a family meeting, and he was suggesting something. He's a professor from America, but a very educated guy. And but he was making some points to his clans people. While he was talking, one young man, this man is about 65, but there was a young man there who was just only 27 or 28 years old, who came, he just stopped there and said, hey, you call yourself a professor and you are just talking grammar. Now English will go shop and just put 10,000 US dollar cash on the table and say, this is money. This is what will resolve the issue. You are talking some principles, something. This is money. This is out. And the elders, when I was growing up in Nigeria, if anybody would have done that in the village, they would have banished that person from the village. But now, those elders who are sitting, the so-called elders who are sitting there, what they said is that, professor, you see, this is a young man. And you see, it is money that talks these days. You see, he brought solution. Money is the solution. And you are just talking. So we have got to do what the young man is saying because he has brought the money. You see, until we dethrone the supremacy of money, the love for money in our society, that thing will not work that you are talking about. We must go back, first of all, to let people know that some things are more important than money. And those things are values and virtues. Those things are principles. Those things are righteousness. Those principles that are should be much more respected. Character, they should be much more respected. Honesty, they should be much more respected than money. When that is an acceptable norm among our people, when everybody understands that things like character, principles, honesty, truth are more important than money, then every other person that is doing wrong, the whole community will be able to say, no, you are going against the norms. You are going against the principle that we have all agreed to abide by. And that is when the community can contribute to building a healthy society. So we still go back to, letting everybody be informed about what is right and what is wrong. But money has become our impediment that we must remove as a big major problem in our society.
There's this popular quote by J.F. Kennedy, ask what you can do for your country. How do we drive home this kind of message to change the narrative and the mindset in Africa?
Oh, beautiful. This is a principle that I will tell you that is not very popular in our society, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I grew up in Nigeria and I was in Nigeria till I was 19 and I finished secondary school in Nigeria. But I never heard any teaching, training, preaching on responsibility. I never heard it. The first time I heard the word, I knew the word responsibility, but I never related it to myself as an individual. When I was in Africa, I thought responsibility is only something for leaders. But the first time I really heard the word about responsibility, the real meaning of responsibility was after I came to Europe. And so what we are talking about and what J.F. Kennedy was talking about is responsibility of every individual before their society. And this is one thing that we hardly teach. When you go back to our people, unfortunately, what we normally, even our elites, what they talk about Go to any normal TV program in Nigeria. They will be telling you what the government is not doing, what the government is supposed to do, what the leaders are supposed to do. But very few of them talk about personal responsibility of every citizen before the society. Every one of us hold the duty to be responsible for our neighbors, to be responsible for our families, to be responsible for the land that we live on, to be responsible for people around us, be responsible to our nation. And those kind of things, we need to begin to talk about it. And people like you in the media, you are also responsible for formulating and propagating the right values in the society, including the value of responsibility.
Now let's expand the scope of that conversation. If people are not to think about what their country would do for them, but rather think of what they can do for their country, how does the country celebrate its heroes and those who have contributed to its development to inspire more people to think of contributing to the nation? Take Nigeria, for instance.
Well, sorry?
Let's use Nigeria as a case study.
Okay. For example, in Nigeria, like many other countries, there are national honors, merits, and medals that they give to encourage people who have contributed to the development of Nigeria. And the same thing happens everywhere. But when you go to a place like America, for example, they don't wait till you get national honor or national merit before you are celebrated. Every community has a way, and it's a whole system of celebrating people who have excelled in that community. Every little town, every little village, every local government, every state also hold events celebrating people who are doing the right thing. And you are very correct. This is one of the ways where we could really propagate these right values, by celebrating those people who are doing the right thing. And we should not just wait until the government does this once in a year, but we should be having such events of celebrating and honoring people who do the right thing every day. Every day there must be some honor somewhere. But the people that we see right now that are being celebrated are people maybe who are in Nollywood, or who are in politics, or who are in sports. And maybe somebody who funds a lost bag of money and brought it. But we must celebrate the little things people do in every sphere of life. That will really contribute to making our country more healthy.
Okay, still in that, we find that when nationally people who have contributed to the country want to be celebrated, sometimes it is done posthumously after they die. That's when a posthumous award is given. How can we correct that too? Timeliness of award.
That's very sad. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. And I think, this is a tradition of celebrating people when they are dead, because unfortunately, we see ourselves as competitors when we're alive. A lot of people who are celebrating people who are dead is because they now see that they cannot compete with them anymore. He's gone, and there is nothing to be afraid of about him. But while he's here, he's like he's an opposition to some people, or a competitor to some people. So, but when we realize that the nation is more important, and the success of the nation is even much more important, then anybody that contributes to that nation, when we love our country, when the love for the nation is preeminent in our heart, then we'll be able to see that anybody that does anything good for the nation has to attract the encouragement from every one of us.
I'll keep making reference to your books because they are quite relevant. This particular on church shift, you made some submissions, and I would like you to talk about the role of churches or the role of church leaders in nation building, and then helping to restore the value system in the society.
I always thank you very much. In that book that you are talking about, I was talking about my shock after living in Europe for close to 40 years, going back to Nigeria and seeing that, for example, I was going to a big church where I was invited to. This church, I think the budget of that church is bigger than the budget of that state. I mean, the church is wealthy, rich. But then when you go into the premises and they have a whole big place there, it's like a whole country, a city, and everything is perfect, working perfectly like in America or like in Europe. But then to get to that place, the street that takes you to that church it was in such a mess, such a horrible state, that it doesn't take 1%, or it doesn't even take 0.1% of their budget to fix that road. So I decided to challenge my colleagues, my pastor friends, about that and say, why don't you, you fix the road. So they were telling me, no, the road is for the government, it's the responsibility of federal government, that one is for the state, that one. You see, this is because egocentrism, selfishness. Religion has embraced selfishness instead of giving love, instead of loving kindness. If you care about people at all, even your own people that has to pass through that road to come to your church, if we understand love, we will know that, no, this is something that we have to do. Apart from that, I also raised another question with the leadership of that church, because just around that same church, outside of it, when you come out, they have a fence. When you get out of this church, just around the fence of the church, you will see all kind of shanties and huts and very horrible sights of people living in poverty. Some selling this, some selling some petty things. And I say, hey, why don't the church take responsibility for all these people? You will be shocked by the response. The teacher told me, the pastor told me, well, God is making a difference between the Christians and non-believers. That when you come in here to the church, you see the way God has blessed us. But those ones, if they want God to bless them, they will come and join the church also, because God is making a difference between those who worship him and those who don't worship him. But I said, but God, Jesus himself left heaven where everything was perfect, came to the earth to rescue us who are wretched. We are supposed to leave our comfort zone, our own churches, and go to those people, even if they will never accept our religion, even if they will never believe in Jesus Christ or Islam. We should go to them and reach out to them with the love of God. This is why Jesus died for us while we were yet sinners. So, to a large extent, the churches and mosques of our country have a long way to go and a lot to contribute to economic development and the general national transformation of our country. That's why I wrote that book, Church Shift, because church must shift its position. The church must shift its worldview. The church must shift its practices. For example, I was telling them, okay, let's go and arrange and give, arrange a scholarship for those children who are not coming to your church, or give food to those people outside. So they were telling me, well, you don't give to the poor so that you don't become poor. If you want to be rich, if you want to be blessed, you give to somebody who is already blessed. So we don't give to all those people who are already poor. We don't want to attract poverty. This is the kind of doctrine, I don't know where that comes from. Because if the European missionaries who brought Christianity to Africa, if they had not built schools, if they had not built hospitals, if they had not educated us, if they had said that, no, we are unbelievers and we will bring curses upon them, Africa would have been in darkness up to now. So the form of Christianity that is being practiced in our country today breaks my heart. That is the reason for that book, Church Shift.
Okay, still on church shift, there is an argument that the poor will always be with us. An example that those who propose this argument is that of Jesus in the Bible, when he was being anointed with oil from the alabaster box. And then Judas made a suggestion of selling and using the proceeds to take care of the poor. And then he said, the poor will always be with you. So that seems to be like a reference. Why some churches or some people would say the church is not supposed to take care of the poor with church money, because the poor will always be with you. Rather, church should use the money to take care of church and probably propagate the gospel, talking about outreaches. And there is also the thing about principles of prosperity, that to prosper, you must give. What is the balance between these two?
Well, most of the people tell you that the way to prosperity is to bring money. They will always tell you that you bring that money, you must bring it to the church, or you must bring it to the man of God. Well, if you put one and one together or two and two together, you will discover that if anybody who is giving money to the pastor or to the church, at the end of the day, the only person who is going to get blessed and prospered at the end of the day is not you who the money is leaving his hand. It is the person, the pastor, who is collecting from 1,000, 2,000 people who is going to be prospered. So it is deception. Anybody who says that the way for you to come to prosperity is by giving to the church or to the pastor is a crook, is a scam. Those are fraudsters and scammers. But let's talk about what you said, that the poor will always be with you. Yes, but what Jesus was saying in that, if to paraphrase him in that phrase, is that he said, let this woman use the alabaster oil for me right now, because I will not always be here. But you will always have the poor people around you to do good to. So me, I will be here for a short time. I will not be here. But the poor people, you have opportunity to take care of them every day. So he is not saying that we shouldn't take care of poor people. He is saying that we have all the rest of our life to care for this kind of people. Now, but those people who say that as well don't tell you the practice of the church in the New Testament. And the practice of the church in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, is that the people who brought tithes, offering, and all their whatever they have to give, who brought it to the church, the Bible says that they laid all those things at the feet of the apostles. And the Bible also said that the apostles never took those things to their pocket. They never used it to buy jets or buy houses or build universities that other people cannot pay for. What did they do with all those tithes and offering that people brought to the church? The Bible said that they distributed to all the needy people, both Christians and unbelievers who are coming to the church. They distributed all the things that people are normally bringing, the tithe and offering, such that there was nobody who lacked. There was none that lacked. None that lacked. Nobody lacked as a result of the charity efforts of the church. So this is what the church is supposed to be about. If the church is supposed to make sure that all the needs of the people, not just in their church, but in their environment and community, are met through the free will offering of those people who can afford it. So that's what I tell my people here in Europe or in Africa, people who listen to me. I tell them, if you don't see what your church is using your tithe and offering for, if you don't see the needy they are taking care of, if you don't see the widows and the orphans that are taken care of, if you don't see the alcoholic and the drug addicts and other people that they are taking care of with your money, don't give money to that church anymore. Use your tithe. You have to give your tithe or offering. You still have to give something from your pocket, because if you stop giving and you only keep everything that you have to yourself, you don't have those things. You don't possess those things. Those things possess you. The principle of tithe is that we shouldn't eat everything. We shouldn't allow things to possess us, but we should always share from what we have. So take your tithe, take your offering, go and look for the needy in your community. Go back to your village every month and look for all the widows there. Look for the orphans there. Look for the old people there, and use your tithe and offering to directly minister to them. This is what Deuteronomy says about tithe and offering. Tithe and offering is for orphans, is for widows, is for strangers, it's for the needy and the poor in the society. So, but people only brought them to church so that church will help them to take care and distribute and take care of the needs of the society. But if you don't see what the church is doing with your money, take your money and look yourself with your own eyes. Look for your relatives that are in need. Look for your village people that are in need. Maybe your brothers and sisters cannot even afford.